I'm here at the Conservative Party of Canada 2023 convention in Quebec City. More than 2,500 Conservative members descending on this convention centre from across the country. And not all of them, I should say, are Conservatives. One of the attendees this morning was Stephen Guibeault. You may remember him as the gentleman who scales buildings in Toronto in the interests of climate justice and also eventually became a cabinet minister. He came to accuse the Conservatives of not having an adequate plan for the climate. Now, he was gracious enough to spend some time talking to reporters, and I asked him why it was incumbent on Canadians to live in energy poverty when Canadians could get rid of the entirety of their emissions and barely blip on the global picture. Canada's carbon emissions are less than 2% of the world's. If every Canadian were to give up their cars and shut their electricity off, it would make no difference compared to what China and other big powerhouses are. So why are you content putting Canadians into energy poverty when it doesn't even solve a global problem?
If you look at what's happening in Canada, Canada is a success story when looking at investment in clean technologies. In fact, Alberta.
Then why do you need more taxes?
Is a Canadian success story when looking at investment in clean technologies and renewable energy. 70% of the investments we've seen in the last year in renewable energy has been in Alberta. I find it baffling that the Premier would put a stop to $30 billion worth of clean technology investment in her province. Canada is an energy powerhouse, and if I can go to China, if I can go to India and say we all have to work together to fight climate change because we're all in this together, it's because we're doing our homework here. We're doing what we need to do to tackle climate change and climate pollution.
As you heard, his answer is effectively that Canadians need to lead by example so that when he goes to China, he can show them all the great things Canada is doing. Except China is not doing that. We actually see China ramping up coal production, ramping up industrialization, and its emissions continuing to increase. So again, Canadians are the ones who are dealing with the consequences of what is oftentimes very radical environmental policy in pursuit of aims that are not being shared by the people who are the source of what the Liberal government in Canada says is the problem. But Stephen Guibeault went further to that. He accused the Conservative inaction on climate, or at least his perception of that, as facilitating the wave of hurricanes and wildfires that we see. Now, obviously, wildfires are a concern. Oftentimes, we can't easily link them to climate change. Just this week, for example, a gentleman was charged criminally with arson in connection to Quebec wildfires. But I asked him, if we go along with this narrative that climate inaction from Conservative politicians is responsible for these events, well, the Liberals have been in government for 8 years now. They have a very sweeping national carbon tax. I decided to ask him why that hasn't stopped it. You mentioned extreme events like wildfires and hurricanes. Why has your carbon tax not stopped those things if that is the answer to these problems?
This question, which I've heard in the House of Commons by many Conservative Party members, including Pierre Poilievre, is yet another example of the fundamental disbelief that you have in climate science and in science full stop. We won't solve climate change overnight, and we certainly won't solve climate change with empty slogans. It's going to take years of hard work to tackle this environmental crisis, and the fact that you believe that somehow we can flick a switch on a wall and everything's going to be fine just shows how the total ignorance that you and many others have when it comes to the issue of climate change.
As you can hear there, he turns it around and blames those who deny science as being the problem. There's no switch to flip, yet even so, the Liberals seem to put a lot of stock in the idea that we can tax our way out of this problem. Well, all we can do is tax more Canadians into energy poverty. For True North from Quebec City, I'm Andrew Lawton.